Hey everyone, George with the Art of Water. Hey, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about lighting and the effects of lighting on algae growth. This is a long-standing question that all of us have about what the effects of light have on algae growth in our aquariums. And I wanted to kind of shed, no pun intended, a little light on that subject. Number one thing that I have found that most aquariums that you purchase do come with their own lighting. I don't always use the lights that come with them, but if they're made for it and there's a particular mount and that sort of thing, it is kind of nice to use it. They have done some research with these lights, obviously, before they sell the equipment to match the lights up to the aquarium and the specifications. On this particular plant here, we're talking about a 7.5 gallon aquatop. This is an aquarium that I have strictly a species situation here. That's not 100% correct, but I have 10 cardinal tetras in here, and I also have 2 autocinclids in here. I don't have anything else in here. I have no shrimp, I have no snails, I have nothing that are working to keep the environment clean. Now, if you'll notice, the autocinclids back there are working on plants that are coming into maybe a little bit of algae on their leaves, and I find that just the 2 autocinclids in this tank really keep that under control. Now, what causes algae when it comes to lighting? There's 2 different things that I think that are important to understand. The first one is, what kind of plants are you putting in your tank? Are they the kind of plants that are slow growing, moderate care, or are they high care and require a lot of light and fast growing plants? Now, I don't have CO2 on this particular tank. I do use CO2 on some tanks, but on this particular one, I don't have the CO2 hooked up because these are all very moderate, low light plants and do not require the CO2. They're all very slow growth plants. Now, I will go through a list of some of the plants that I have in here, and then we'll start talking a little bit more about the lighting that I have and go into that into a little bit more detail. As you'll notice in the front, anybody that is familiar with Anubias, this is a couple of the plants in here are Anubias nano. I also have some Anubias that is the standard Anubias, and then I do have some swords in the front here. They're small dwarf swords. That would be these guys right here, and also over here and towards the back. As you get to the back of the aquarium, you're going to see that I do have some ferns in here. Now, unfortunately, it escapes me as to what those ferns are, but I know that they are very fast, they're not fast growing, they're very slow growing ferns, and they do not require a lot of light. In fact, they can grow in pretty much no light whatsoever and be healthy. Now, some of the smaller plants that I have in the front here are just some carpeting plants that do need to be trimmed. I try to trim this tank back here about once every couple of weeks, and it's ready for a trim. You can see the ones in the back I don't care because they're pretty much the same plant and they're growing a little bit more for some reason. I don't know why. It could be because the substrate is a little bit deeper back there and the rooting on that is just a little bit better. Anyways, let's get into the lighting portion of this video and talk about the effects of lighting and how we can control it. There's a couple of different ways to control lighting. Number one, the light that comes with your tank or one that you decide to use with your tank comes with a mount on it. And typically 99.9% of these do not have any kind of dimming situation on them. Now, there are lights out there that have built-in dimmers. This one happens to be an LED. It does not have a dimmer on it, and so therefore it is exactly what it is. Now, what I do to control the amount of light that's coming into this particular aquarium is I use the mounting bracket and I raise the bar on it, as you can see up here, up or down based on what we have the ability to adjust it by. Now, what I mean by that is the plastic bracket slides into the back there. You can push it down further or you can raise it up, and that gives you a little bit more control of your light situation in the tank. Now, I have this extended up as high as I can because it disperses the light thoroughly through the tank, and I feel that it does keep the light to about a par 30 to a par 35, which is perfect for these kind of plants, the lower or slower growth, moderate plants, and it does a fantastic job of just keeping algae at bay. Now, the second thing that I do with the lighting is the tank is set up on a timer to run approximately 8 hours a day. What I do is about halfway through that 8-hour period, I shut the light off for approximately 2 hours to not only rest the plants from the light, because I'm not using CO2. As you know, if we were using CO2 doesn't do any good unless you have light going. But because this is not a CO2 planted tank, I can control that lighting, and I find that it really does give the plants an opportunity to not have algae take foot and start to take over your plants. Now, this tank has been set up for quite a while, and what I suggest to anyone, and probably most people that are in the hobby would tell you, plant as many plants as you can in a tank when you first set it up, because it's so much harder to go back and put more plants in at a later time. So if you can afford to, put what you can in there. Put the kinds of plants in there that you think are great for the fish. These are Cardinals. They like a well-planted aquarium where they can hide. These Cardinals here, as you can see, are out and about. They're not schooling because comfortable Cardinals do not always school. They will school early in the mornings or late in the evenings when you shut the lights off, or you first in the morning turn them on, because they're a little bit frightened. Once they get a little bit more used to things during the day, you'll find that they're sort of free rangers that sort of go around the tank, not really as a group, but as a solo. This is a sign of a good, healthy tank where the fish are not only getting the benefits of clean water and good water parameters, but they're comfortable enough where there's enough plants in there where they can just bolt out of sight into any one of these areas in the tank and find cover in the planted part of the tank. Now, what I would suggest to you is, if you can, again, plant as many plants as you can in the tank, because there's two things that happen. Number one, you don't have to go back and plant the tank again. And the second thing that happens is your plants compete with the elements that require algae to grow. And if you have enough plants in your tank, they will compete with that algae and they will stop it in its tracks. And this is just an absolute truth about the way algae works. And they do have to have an environment where they are not competing with so many other plants that they can take foot and and really cause problems in your tank. Now, I'm not going to say that we'll never get any algae in this tank, but I'm going to tell you for sure that it will certainly be a manageable amount of algae that the autocinclids will either take care of, or my water changes that I do once a week. Usually do 50% on a established tank for up to about 6 months, and then I drop it back to a quarter of a water change at least once a week, and that also contributes to a healthy tank and keeps algae at bay. So, having said that, again, the autocinclids, I believe, do control any algae that might get into the tank. Now, they do require food. So if there's not enough algae in your tank, you can buy some algae tabs that give them a little bit of a supplement so that they can thrive. If autocinclids do stop eating, it's hard to get them back to eating again, and they will die. So the second thing you want to do in a smaller tank like this, which I consider a nano tank, as anyone would, is you want a pair of autocinclids. You don't want to put anything less than a pair in there. In fact, most autocinclids would love to have, 4, 5, or 6 even in a tank. So the bigger the tank, the more autocinclids you would want to put in there. This is a small tank, and I seem to find that in all of my nano tanks, a pair of autocinclids do just fine and thrive in there with a supplement of algae tabs if needed. So getting back to the water changes, again, I do a quarter water change once a week. Getting back to the light, I've got this adjusted to where the height on it is putting out about a par 30 to a par 35, depending on the time of day, because there are some windows in this room that can make that fluctuate just a little bit. But yeah, par 30 to par 35 for these moderate to slow growing plants. Now, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Leave the comments down below. If you like the video and you got some information out of it that was helpful for you, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to George Wheeler, The Art of Water, I would sure appreciate it. The subscriptions are important to me, and we've got some great things coming up here over the next couple of months that I think you're going to really find interesting, and some beautiful tanks that we're going to be building here in the near future. Anyways, this is George with The Art of Water. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll talk again soon.